Disclaimer. These videos show some tips to help you on a true hike of the AT. The ideas presented are not the only way, merely one hiker's experience. Remember, hike your own hike.
Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to
Tips from the Trail.
And today, I'm back on the AT, and I want to talk a little bit about shelters. You know, what are the shelters on the AT? When do you want to use them? When do you not want to use them? How often should you use them? What's the do's and don'ts with shelters and all that kind of stuff. And as you can see, I am in a shelter right now. It's a pretty nice shelter, actually. So, let's get right into it. Cut! Let's get right into it. Okay, so when talking shelters, when someone says a shelter on the AT, they're referring to what's known as a Adirondack shelter or an Adirondack lean-to. It's a three-walled shelter with a slanted roof, and for the most part it's got a ground level surface to sleep on. And I want to emphasize for the most part, there are so many varieties of shelters on the AT that there is no one way to describe them all. Now, like I said, most shelters are three-walled, slanted roof, surface to sleep on, but some of them have four walls. There's some that have doors that are completely enclosed. There's some that have chimneys where you can start and have a fire and the smokies. There's some that are close enough to people's houses that they take care of them, and they have these solar powered showers that I never found one that worked well. The Fontana Hilton's got a shower. Sometimes they're multiple levels and there's attic spaces to sleep in, and there is just so many varieties of shelters. There's no good way to explain to people all of them. So what I'll suggest is a good way for while you're on the trail to get that information. Like always, one of my number one tips is a good guidebook, and you can learn a lot from that. But even the guidebooks are lacking sometimes because shelters change from year to year, and it's hard for the guidebooks when they get updated to get all the information. The best way is to ask people. You're going to meet so many people on the trail. Southbounders, day hikers, weekend warriors, all of these people, especially the ones that live around the area, are going to know a lot about shelters and the condition that they're in, and be able to give you all the information you need. With a little bit of work, you should know what's coming ahead of you in the shelters and whether or not you want to stay there. Alright guys, here's a perfect example of a Adirondack style lean-to. Built out of logs, three walls, a slanted roof. This one is actually quite nice because it's got a little bit of a fourth wall to help block some wind. Platform for you to sleep on. And but as you can see, it's not sealed up. You're gonna get a lot of wind. This one in particular is, and I'll put the name here, and it's the old shelter. And up top here, what I'll show you in a bit, is the new shelter. Now, this is in good shape. I don't know why they felt the need to build a new one, but it does lead me to one thing, because this one's been around for a while, and one thing you'll see, and they've painted over a lot of it, and I'm sure they do every year. Oh, I don't want to look at that one. And basically, this isn't that bad. Let me look back in here. It looks like the caretaker of this shelter does a really good job at taking care of it. and keeping it painted. But it's the graffiti. It's common, it's contagious. I even had the urge when I started my thru hike to leave my little mark on the shelter. Just, you know, put the hiking Viking was here or something, you know, and you get that urge. I never did, and I'm glad I didn't, because the more, and it was at the very beginning, but the more I hiked the trail and the more I saw how the graffiti is, I mean, there's a lot of cursing, and it's just, it's not good. You gotta have, there's kids that come to these shelters and stuff, so there's no reason to leave graffiti in the shelters. Fight the urge, be the one, not the one, but be one of the people that don't leave graffiti there. Use the shelter logbooks as your way of leaving your mark on the shelter or letting people know that you were there. Don't write on the shelters. All right. This is what I'm talking about. This is a nice shelter. Don't expect to get these too often on the AT. Let me set this down. This is pretty beautiful in here. There we go. It's got a little loft area to hold more people. It's still, you know, open to the elements, so it's still not perfect for, you know, it's not going to keep you super warm, but it is going to block a lot of the wind. It's got a little front porch on it, little picnic table. The floor is in great shape. I mean, I feel like I need to be taking my boots off before I even come in here. But this is an example of some of the really nice shelters that you'll find on the trail. But don't expect them all to be like this. Also, shelters are not always called shelters. On different sections of the trail, they're gonna have different names. A shelter can describe a lean-to, but when you get into the Shenandoahs, if I remember right, they call them huts in the Shenandoahs. But in the Whites, huts are places that you can pay to stay at or work for stay. So the terminology changes along the trail. And again, you should be able to keep up with the changes by asking people and looking in your guidebooks. And I'm pretty sure at the beginning of the Shenandoahs, there's even a sign that tells you that. So they do change the name along the way. As far as how many huts there are on the AT, I am not sure. That information's out there. I think there's 200, 250. Oh, there's nothing. There's a lot, and I called it hut, shelters. There is a lot of shelters along the AT. Now, for the most part, they're anywhere from 5 to 10 miles apart, sometimes closer. There are a few rare sections of the trail where I think in New York State, there's a 30-mile section where there is no shelters. And then obviously, the Whites are a different situation with having to pay for shelters and having less in the huts and such. But yeah, there's plenty of shelters along the way for you to stay at. I'm gonna add an additional disclaimer to this statement, and I'm going to crush everybody's dream of hiking the AT and not taking a tent or any other shelter with you and just planning on staying in the shelters along the trail. I'm going to say boldly that that is not possible. I don't care what time you leave. I don't care how early you get to shelters. If you hike the entire AT, there is going to be a time you're going to go to a shelter and it will be full. So right now I would suggest for everybody, whether they plan on doing the majority of their sleeping in shelters, have a backup shelter that you carry with you. It can be as easy as just a bivy sack or a tarp tent. And yeah, you can cowboy camp too, but there's a good chance that when that shelter is full, it's because it's raining. So you should always have that. I mean, a tent or a hammock, I mean, any of those varieties. Carry an extra shelter with you. The AT is so popular, and even starting early as we did in February, we had full shelters up north because of the southbounders that are starting, or around the the holidays and nice times during the year, a lot of people are out hiking and taking weekend hikes, and shelters fill up. So always carry an extra shelter with you. There are some sections on the trail that a shelter is required and that you're not allowed to actually camp. The Smoky Mountains, for example. Let's cover the whys and the why nots. Why would you want to stay at a shelter, and why may you not want to stay at a shelter? First off, the why to stay at a shelter, rain. I think the main reason why we stayed at shelters on the AT was because it will significantly keep you dry. It will keep you much drier in a tent, because if you have to pack up or set up your tent in the rain, stuff's going to get wet. So shelters really help keep your gear dry. Also, shelters are good for getting out and getting an early start. Without having to set up a tent and extra gear, you can pack up quicker and get going earlier in the morning. Another reason you may want to stay at a shelter is a lot of times they're equipped with bear hangs or a bear box or a way of dealing with hanging your food that's more convenient than having to do your own bear hang. I'd like to put out a video soon. I've started to record some stuff about bear hangs and the wheres and the whys and stuff about that. So hopefully I can get that out. But yeah, shelters really help with bear hangs, and not only being able to hang your food because it has that option, whether it be a bear box, but also as a good signal to where you should hang your food and where you need to use bear hang. If a shelter has a bear hang or a bear box, it's there for a reason. So even if you don't stay at that shelter, that's a good sign that in that area you should definitely be hanging your food. Another great reason to stay at a shelter, and it's one that people don't talk about as much, is most shelters have privies. And whether you are pro privy or not, it is a convenience to have that in a lot of your shelters, and in the guidebooks they're marked whether they do or do not have privies. A lot of your shelters do, and that's just an added convenience. Okay, that should cover most of the pros. There's one that can be a pro and a con, and I'll use that as a transition, and that is people. Shelters are where the people will be. People congregate at shelters because of the little conveniences and stuff, and it can be such a great thing to stay at a shelter and meet new people and to have those experiences. I don't have a lot of information about around the time of the bubble. I've heard the shelters get real bad at that time because there's so many people that are on the trail. You know, that time the bubble starts, you know, mid-March to mid-April is when that big group starts. And I hear the shelters get pretty bad then. So it can also be a con because, well, people tend to do some nasty things. I mean, whether it be garbage or whether there's some people that you're not real comfortable being around, people partying at shelters and whatnot, that may be a reason that you want to avoid them. For us on our thru hike, we spent most of our time, if it wasn't raining, camping. And I'm gonna do another video on tents and stuff. Our tent was our home, and I would probably, if to do it again, still avoid shelters because of that feeling of security in being in your own home and not having a lot of extra people. The registers are at shelters. So if you're not going to stay at shelters, you will still find yourself wanting to at least go there for lunch because, well, that's where the registers are. That's where your hiking friends are letting you know where they are, or if there's someone behind you and you want to send them a message, you know, that's where the registers are. So that's another reason why shelters are a place that you're probably going to go to quite a bit. Some shelters that you may want to avoid on the trail are shelters that have easy road access, shelters that people can get to within a mile or so from a road. And you'll be able to see that on your guidebook, especially if you're going to be approaching those shelters around the weekend or nice weather. You're going to find that that's where people tend to show up and have parties and make a mess of the place. And when you're through hiking, a lot of times you're worried about making miles, going to bed early, waking up and getting going. So that can really be a nuisance when you're trying to hike, is if you go to a shelter and there's 20 people there. Another reason, I feel like I'm starting all the time with another reason, you may not want to stay at a shelter because there are a lot of other people staying there that will tend to be snoring at night. It's probably a bit of information everybody's heard. Shelters can be kind of loud with snoring people. Almost fell. Or people coming in late at night. I mean, people are going to hike into the night. A lot of people are getting into night hiking, so you may be sleeping and have people come in. And when you're not that comfortable in the woods, having something barge into a shelter at 2 in the morning may be a little frightening. So that's something that can and will happen. One way you can kind of help that is, it's very light. Carry a couple earplugs. That may help you sleep in the case that you have some bad snoring guys in the shelter. A lot of people think that they want to stay at shelters because they're going to be warmer than sleeping in a tent. Now, I'm not 100% sure if it's different for other people, but in my experience, a tent is actually much warmer than a shelter. And it has a lot to do with the 4 walls. You know, most times the shelter's got 3 walls, and if a gust of wind blows in, you know, you're gonna get cooled right down. With a tent, having the 4 walls and keeping the wind off of you is crucial. And not only that, because the shelters have floors built, it allows wind to blow underneath them. And if it's gonna be 10 degrees outside, if you set your tent up and you warm the ground up underneath you a little bit, that ground underneath you is going to help insulate you. If you're sleeping on a floor that's got 10 degrees cold air blowing underneath it all night, you're never going to be able to heat that up, and you're actually going to get cooled down from underneath you as well. Oh look, it's Mama White Blaze. Oh, isn't she pretty? Always follow Mama White Blaze and don't be betrayed by Sister Blue Blaze. Words of wisdom. Well, I would say probably the biggest downside to shelters is because of the shelter mice. There's a lot of different ways of dealing with them, but no matter what you do, there's going to be mice in the shelters. I'll go over a couple ways to deal with them, but they're gonna wanna get into your food. Obviously, hanging your food out of the shelter is your best option. If you're hanging your food in the shelter, a lot of shelters have mice hangs, which will keep mice from dropping from the ceiling and landing on your food bag and eating into it. And there's a chance that you're gonna have mice running over you at night. So that's kind of a bummer. But main tip, I guess, would be to obviously keep the food away from them so they can't get into it. And then also open up all of your pockets in your pack and in your jackets and anything that may have had food in it that they can smell. You're not gonna stop them. If they want to get into your jacket pocket, they will chew a hole in it. So if you can't stop them, then let them in. Best thing to do, your pouch pockets on your hip belt, open them up, let the mice sniff around inside of there and leave. It's a lot better than them chewing a hole through your pack. Now, we heard, before our thru hike, we heard of this genius way of dealing with the mice, and that was that you leave them a peace offering. And whether it be just a couple peanuts or a little bit of trail mix, and you leave them a little peace offering at night, and they'll fill themselves up with that. and they'll leave you alone and they won't take the rest of your food. And I will say that this does work. We did it for the first month or so on the trail. We would leave some sunflower seeds for the mice. Now this does work, but now that I've thought about it a while and talking to some people on the trail, I don't recommend it, because really what you're doing is you're just increasing the problem. Think about the next hiker that's coming through. If you keep feeding, if everybody's feeding the mice problem is just going to get bigger and bigger. So I would recommend dealing with the mice in a way that's not actually promoting, you know, population growth. So as soon as we've kind of thought of that, we really quickly stopped doing that. On to shelter etiquette. Just, I guess for the most part, just be nice to the hikers, be respectful, and do what you'd want. What is it? Do unto others as you wish others to do unto you. But yeah, I've heard stories of, you know, a shelter says it fits 8 people, and a 9th person comes in and it's pouring down rain, and they say, well, it only fits 8 people. You can always make room for one other person. The tighter you cram people into a shelter, the warmer you're gonna be anyways. So if you can make room, get out of here, tree. I would say, you know, if someone comes in and they're ill prepared and the shelter's full and you are prepared, you know, let them have your spot in the shelter. Just think about it being in that situation. I know that, yeah, it's their fault they didn't prepare properly, but if you have a means of going out and camping and being okay, and they don't have a sleeping bag that's proper temperature, or a tent, and they're gonna just be miserable or in danger, you know, let them have your spot. We gave up our spot in a shelter a couple times, and you know, it's just good to be nice. Earlier I touched base on the fact that I think tents are a little bit warmer than shelters. A lot of people believe that the combination is the best way to go. So you'll see people wanting to set their tents and their hammocks up in shelters. I'm guilty. We've done it a couple times when we had 0-degree temperatures when we first started. It was cold and we set our tent up in shelters. So I can't say that don't do it. I will say don't be hammering nails into the shelter or trying to, you know, jam your tent stakes in or anything like that. So don't you know, destroy the shelter in any way. And then if someone comes in, take it down. You can't take up the whole shelter. Everybody has a right to be in there. So yeah, if there's gonna be no one there, when we camped on top of Springer Mountain, it was snowing and cold. We set our tent up inside the shelter, but there was nobody else there. And also there was another time where Gator Eddie and Sharon and I were in a shelter, and we set our tent up, but we set it up at the front of the shelter so that our tent kind of acted as that 4th wall and blocked the wind, and they slept on the other side of our tent. So, you know, work with the other people. That's what happens when you get into a shelter. It's a community space. So there's a lot of pros and cons with it, and you just have to know that if you're going to be in the shelter, that you're gonna need to deal with people, and deal with people in the right way. But there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That is what I know about the shelters on the Appalachian Trail. I hope this video has been helpful, and stay tuned for more tips from the trail, because if it worked for me, it may work for you. Bye-bye.
Until we meet.
Oh, he was gonna pull away though.
Happy trails to you. Smiling until then.
Here, we can walk around.
Happy trails to you.
Here's his famous expression. Felice and Daryl. Happy trails. Felice and Daryl.
Stay safe. Keep it twin blaze.